Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 9 criteria for BPD and how they present in my life. So before I get into it, I just want to give a quick disclaimer that this video is meant for educational purposes only. BPD is something that has to be diagnosed by a mental health professional, and this video is not meant to be used for diagnostic purposes. I am not a professional, I am just someone who has BPD and would like to share a little bit more information about it. So, the first criteria is chronic feelings of emptiness. This is one that I experience a lot, and it is very, very difficult to deal with. For me, the way I experience this is kind of feeling like I have a lack of emotion or just feeling numb, no motivation, and just really not finding things that I enjoy fun anymore. It's extremely difficult to deal with. Everyone experiences it a little bit differently, but that's how I experience it, just kind of like numb and empty, and like kind of there's nothing really going on that could be like exciting or fun for me. The second is emotional instability in relation to day-to-day events, with often very intense periods of different emotions. So for me, the way I experience it is basically I feel like all of my emotions are permanent. When I'm sad, I feel like sadness is the only emotion that exists. When I'm angry, it feels like anger is the only emotion that exists. And also the same for happiness to a different degree, that when I'm happy, then I'm like, oh, I'm never going to be sad again. So kind of like this lack of emotional permanence, basically, where I feel these things very strongly, very intensely, and they're very overwhelming. And they can switch rapidly throughout the day, or they can last a couple days and then switch. But for me, most often, I feel like I experience them um, in different points throughout the day. Like in the beginning of the day, maybe I'm really sad, and then something happens that makes me happy, or then something happens and I'm really angry, and all of my emotions feel extremely strong and extremely intense, and they kind of rapidly change based on the events and what's going on around me. Criteria number 3 is frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. This is another one that I deal with a lot, and for me, it looks two main ways. The first way is extreme people pleasing, where I am doing everything in my power to make sure that this person is not going to leave me. And then at the other end, I feel like I'm going to leave the person before they can abandon me. And a lot of the times, for me, this actually is imagined abandonment instead of real abandonment. Both can happen. But for me, I experience these things mostly when I'm thinking about my therapist and when I'm thinking about my husband. I get worried that these people are going to abandon me, so I have to do whatever I can to make sure that they're happy, to make sure that they won't leave me. Or sometimes I feel the opposite, where I'm like, they're going to leave me anyways, so I need to prepare and figure out how to leave them first. Number 4 is identity disturbance with unstable sense of self-image or sense of self. So this is another one that I experience pretty strongly. A lot of the times I feel like I don't know who I am, and I don't really know much about me, and I feel like I don't have like my own personality. I kind of just take on the personality of whoever I'm with. And this can be really, really difficult to deal with. And I also end up experiencing times where I really like myself, and then times where I really, really hate myself. And so it's very unstable for me, just like the criteria says, where I go back and forth in how I'm thinking about myself and have a very hard time, saying who I am or what defines me as a person. Criteria number 5 is impulsive behavior in 2 areas that are self damaging. And for this criteria, we are excluding self harm and suicidal ideation. So for me, the 2 areas that I experience this in are reckless driving and intense emotional relationships with people that I probably shouldn't be getting emotionally involved with. I often am doing both of those things in order to combat the first criteria, the feelings of emptiness, because being deeply emotionally involved with someone helps me to feel less empty. And sometimes the reckless driving makes me feel like happy or like I'm having fun. And so I feel less empty. But I do realize that both of these things are dangerous and that they end up making things worse for me in the long run. Number 6 is inappropriate, intense anger and or difficulty controlling your anger. So this one kind of presents in 2 ways in me again. So used to be I would direct this anger outwards, and this would look like I would yell at people, I would say very mean or sarcastic things, and it would be my anger would be like in reaction to something that I didn't need to get that explosively angry about. I don't really do that much anymore. Now my anger kind of presents differently, where I direct it inward, where I experience it as like extremely negative self talk and kind of always putting myself down and always feeling angry with myself. So, both ways of experiencing anger are valid within the BPD criteria. I know it's often just thought of as the outward explosive anger that's the criteria, but it can be directed inward as well. Criteria number 7 is a pattern of unstable or intense relationships characterized by extremes between idealization and devaluing. So that's also called splitting, which is where you really like someone at first and then you split and then you decide that you absolutely hate them and they're a terrible person. So I've experienced splitting with friends. I've experienced splitting with my husband. I've experienced splitting with therapists. Often when I first meet someone, I think that they're like the greatest person ever, and I absolutely love them and think that they're amazing. And then eventually something will happen and I'll end up splitting where I'm like, wow, this person is actually the worst. And a lot of the time, splitting isn't really founded in reality, which makes it something that you can actually learn to recognize and control. You can't control necessarily how you're feeling about someone, but you can kind of look at the facts of a situation and say, like, did this person really do something that should make me hate them and never talk to them again? Or am I splitting and I need to just take a step back and kind of rethink about things before moving forward with my relationship? Um, Initially, when I read this criteria, when I was first diagnosed, I thought it only meant romantic relationships, but this can be any relationship. It can be friendships, it can be therapist client relationships, it can be coworkers, it can be family. So it's not just romantic relationships, it's applied to any relationship that you have in your life. Number 8 is recurrent suicidal behaviors or threats and or self-harm. So both of these are something that I experience a lot. I experience a pretty high level of suicidal ideation all the time, and it varies with degrees of intent and plan. And then I've also been struggling with self harm with cutting specifically since I was in middle school. So these are two things that I still deal with. And I believe, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that BPD is one of the only, if not the only, mental health disorder that is suicidal behavior and self harm is used in the criteria. And the last criteria, number 9, is transient stress related paranoid ideation and or severe dissociation symptoms. So for me, I experienced the dissociation to a pretty high level. I've been on a medication that's been helping with my dissociation, so it's been getting a little bit better lately. But a lot of the times I feel like I'm very disconnected with myself or my surroundings. I feel like I'm not the one living my life. I'm kind of watching somebody else live my life, or like I've described in other videos, kind of feel like I'm playing a first or third person video game where I'm like I'm aware that I'm the one making the decisions, but I feel like there's a step removed between me watching myself do it and the person who's actually doing the behaviors. So, a couple things to close with is that for BPD, you have to meet 5 of the 9 criteria. So, you can meet 5 is the minimum you can meet. So, you can meet more than that in order to be diagnosed with borderline, but you don't have to meet all 9. And what this means is that there are hundreds of different combinations of the criteria that a person can have. And so, BPD is going to present very differently from person to person. Another really important thing about BPD that I always really like to stress in any of my BPD videos is that BPD is not a life sentence. There is a lot of misinformation about borderline personality disorder on the internet, and a lot of people have the belief that if you have BPD, you have it for life and there's nothing you can do about it. BPD is treatable and remission is possible if you get on the correct medications and have really good therapy. So you don't have to feel like if you have BPD that this is your life and you're never going to get better, because there is hope and remission is possible. So that is it for today's video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.